and start with the Pledge of Allegiance. And Deanne, would you like to lead?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, you were magnificent yesterday. Board of Supervisors.
Yeah, you were down there rabble rousing yourself.
I was, and I wanted it to all be done.
So is there any public comment? Okay, none. We will go forward to the swearing in of our new board member.
Must be Quincy.
Hi. Nice to
I'm
meet you.
Gina. Nice to meet you. You could raise your right hand. You don't have to repeat, okay?
Done it a couple times.
Okay. That I, Quincy Cromer, do solemnly swear and affirm that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that you will bear true faith and allegiance to the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of California, that you take this obligation freely without mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that you will well and faithfully discharge the duties upon which you are about to enter. You hereby attest as a member of the Board of Retirement of Mendocino County Employees Retirement Association that you will carry out your duties and responsibilities with respect to MRSA according to the highest fiduciary standards and in compliance with the laws, regulations, policies applicable to MRSA.
I do.
Well, welcome.
Thank you.
Also, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Certainly. My name's Quincy Cromer. For those of you I haven't met, I've met a few of you. I grew up in Nebraska. I was born and raised there and went to college there. And after I finished college at the University of Nebraska in Kearney, I moved to Ukiah, California in 2004. My wife is originally from here, and we met in college in Nebraska. So after finishing college, we moved here, and I, at the time, went to college to be a journalist and a reporter. So I met some of the people on the board at that time. I worked for the Ukiah Daily Journal in 2004 until late 2005, at which time I was assigned to the law enforcement court and fire beat, as they called it, for the Ukiah Daily Journal. And I fell in love with it. And I started doing ride-alongs every Friday night, and I like the ride-alongs more than I like my day job, so I decided to apply and was hired at the Ukiah Police Department. I worked there from late 2005 until 2008 when I transferred to the sheriff's office. And from that time I've had experience as a police officer, a dispatcher, a field training officer, a detective for numerous years, and most recently as a supervisor as a sergeant with the sheriff's office in 2016.
Wow.
So my wife and I live here and have since 2004, and we have one daughter who's 11. So
That's really interesting.
Who did you marry?
her name is Kale Smallcombe. So, yeah.
I love it.
And also, it sounds like you're interested in investments and in
I
helping
am.
us.
I'm very interested in learning. I'm not going to sit here and look everybody in the face and say that I know what you do. I don't, but I'm here to learn and do the absolute best job that I can. And I'm reading everything that is being forwarded to me. So
We have a lot of opportunities, educational opportunities also. We have a fall and spring State Association of County Retirement Systems conference, and then we have, in July, we have a UC Berkeley investment workshop. It lasts 3 to 4 days, and then we have a multitude of different options and opportunities to
Yeah.
become more acquainted.
it's certainly something that Deputy Walker talked to me numerous times about the different trainings he was able to attend, and I'm excited about those. So,
Yeah.
And we're all still learning.
yeah.
I'm not an expert in it yet.
Nobody got here knowing how it all works.
Right.
You
Yeah.
anyway.
Absolutely.
Well, lot of people think they know from the outside, but
I don't.
Well, we all try to work together and do what we're supposed to do, which is look out for our members' pensions.
My God,
Gotta
Okay,
know which set of instructions to read.
oh, the executive fund.
Yes. Okay, sorry, Madam Chair.
no, that's fine. So next, we're moving on to the consent agenda. Is there any need for discussion? Does anybody have any issues with the minutes or the retirement report, preliminary monthly financial report? Does anyone want to go through any of that? Or do we just want to approve and move on? We don't really need it.
Adopted by unanimous consent?
Yeah.
Madam Chair, we have a public here, Kendall's in the,
Yeah,
do we recognize her?
we can. I mean, I asked for public comment.
Oh, you
but-
did? Okay,
Yes.
didn't hear you,
But I
sorry.
didn't, but Kendall, is there something, did you want to speak or?
No,
Okay.
just glad to be here.
Okay, we're glad you're here. Okay, so, we're moving forward, to discussion and possible action regarding investment matters, monthly investment report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trustees, you have the monthly report from Callan in your materials, and I will go over this very, very briefly. You can see that in the month of February, the market value was up 11.4 million to a value of 515 million at the end of the month. Returns obviously were positive across most categories for the month. The bond aggregate was down slightly, and I'm on page 3 of the calendar report there where I see the Bloomberg aggregate index number of -6 basis points. But our fixed income portfolio was up 26 basis points there. We had a good month, 2.26 total return for the overall portfolio, beating the benchmark, and that is notable because there are no real estate returns in there. So we will be even further ahead of the benchmark once we get our real estate returns. We only get those quarterly, so because those are both private funds. I don't have anything specific to talk about in the investment report other than just the high-level topics, but I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. And you're solely relying on me today because Stan's gone.
Aw.
So,
Certainly looks better than previous
Yeah.
report.
no correlation to Stan leaving there.
So,
Or Quincy coming.
No pressure.
so is there any more discussion about the monthly investment report? Should we move on to the discussion and possible action regarding fiscal 18-19 budget amendments?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trustees, you have the budget amendments before you, and I need to apologize. There was an error in the spreadsheet that was originally sent out. We have corrected the error in the spreadsheet that is on our website, but if you're looking at the document through Filer, we have not updated that document yet. So if you're looking at the document from Filer, if you can get rid of that and go to our website and pull the budget amendment, that has the corrected spreadsheet there. The issue has to do with the increase in the budget, the requested increase in budget authority under the disability category. The increase in dollar amount is the same. We're still recommending an increase in that budget of $38,000. I just had it on the wrong line in the disability category. It was on the administrative review, but it needed to be on the hearings. So we've corrected that on the document that's on our website. It hasn't been corrected on Filer because Judy handles that and she's been out sick this week. So my apologies for that, and that's what happens when you rely on me to do the accounting.
I can see how you made that mistake, because the administrative review is 38,000
Right.
and the difference is 38, so
Right.
it made sense.
It
Yes,
was actually a test.
and you're saying I failed.
No, we put it in and read it. It was
Failed.
the trick question.
Oh, okay. Everything else I've explained in the memo, and I'd be happy to answer any questions. I would recommend the board adopt the budget revision as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Abstain?
Do you want a roll call or just voice vote?
Well, we can do voice vote, I'm sure.
Okay.
So all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstain? Motion passes. Okay. So, moving on, we're going to the discussion regarding California Supreme Court decision in CalFIRE versus CalPERS.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This was a significant court case that we have been waiting on. So we wanted to put it in front of you as soon as it became available. We have shared the opinion with you. We've gotten a number of perspectives from other legal parties. Jeff and I are here to talk about it today. I'm going to shut up and let the lawyer actually speak. So, Jeff, explain to us what this means.
Sure. So the short answer is it was a much anticipated decision, and the court kind of punted. They didn't really need to get to the issue of this idea of the California rule because they felt that there was no vested right with regard to airtime. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what airtime is, it's being able to purchase service time for time you didn't work. And so to folks who maybe even inside the pension world and certainly outside felt like this is just kind of a spiking thing. And it was interesting to me that the unions kind of pushed this issue forward. But in any event, the court felt that it wasn't a vested right because there was really no kind of contractual relationship for this benefit, because to have a contract, both sides need to be giving something up. That's called consideration. And so if you didn't actually pay the money for the service time, there was no benefit that kind of accrued to you, and so they felt that it wasn't a vested right. But let me back up for a minute, because I think it's important to see, because there are other cases pending and this whole idea of the California rule and how did we get here. And I don't really have to back up too far, but I'll back up to like the early 2000s, and I will be brief. So in the early 2000s, the pension systems in California were pretty much fully funded, very close to, if not at 100%. And at that point, whether they were having difficulty attracting folks to work in the public sector or not, I'm not quite sure. But in any event, a lot of the systems increased the formula to make it more attractive. It also certainly benefited the folks who were already in the pipeline. So formulas increased to 3% at 60 in a lot of systems. Mendocino, I guess, wasn't one of them. And then you fast forward about to the end of that decade, 2007, 2008, and you have the biggest stock market collapse since the Great Depression. And you have those two things combining, this increase in benefits with the huge drop in the stock market, created significant unfunded liability. And so a lot of folks, whether they were politicians or people who were opposed to public pensions in general, whatever. I mean, public pensions kind of flew under the radar, I think, for the most part until that time. And so there was a lot of pressure. What are we going to do with this unfunded liabilities? Boards of supervisors and city councils are, realizing this is becoming a big part of the budget. How can we fill potholes? And so there was a legislative response. Although it wasn't really a legislative response, it was really a response from the governor's office. And so in 2012, the governor's office crafted the PEPRA law. And it wasn't drafted by the legislature. It was drafted out of the governor's office. And why that's kind of significant and somewhat certainly unique is that when a law gets enacted, there's going to be terms in there that are a little bit vague and ambiguous, and how do you interpret them? And when the legislature does it, the legislators themselves speak on the issue, and that becomes the legislative history. And that kind of helps explain what was the legislative intent. But this all arose out of the governor's office. And so there was no discussions, it just kind of, here's the law. And there were some terms in there that maybe were somewhat ambiguous. And so this PEPRA law, the intent was to try to, in a fairly conservative way, try to rein in the costs of pensions. And so this idea of vested rights, for folks who've already retired, I think everybody agrees, whether, you know, whatever side of the spectrum you're on, that you can't change somebody's pension that they're already getting. And I think it was also agreed that you could change it for folks who are new employees, and that's what PEPRA was designed to do. So for folks who, you know, there was kind of a cap, and you couldn't have a pension benefit greater than about $100,000. Instead of, you know, if you worked for 30 years and your salary was $180,000, you're going to get about $180,000 a year. So they capped it and reined it in and eliminated some of these so-called spiking provisions on a go-forward basis for new hires. And the real question that's out there, two questions really. One is, what about folks who are current employees? Can you change their formula on a go-forward basis? And people felt that when PEPRA was enacted, it only addressed new employees. And there were some who felt, well, that's not really enough to rein in pension costs. We need to try to do more. So there were all kinds of proposals. Some people try to put things on the ballot in certain counties and statewide. And so Governor Brown, you know, came up with this PEPRA legislation, and it only addressed new employees. So then there were some lawsuits that were filed at that time, and questions rose about the ability to change the formula for current employees on a go-forward basis. And that brings up this idea of the California rule. And there's some court decisions that go back to the 1940s and 50s and 60s, and if you flipped it all through this decision, you could see how long it was. And they didn't really get to that issue. And there have been a lot of pundits and attorneys speculating on, you know, what can you read from this decision? Can you parse out what the court might do? Because there's another case that's pending out of the Marin County retirement system. And so the California rule basically says that you can't change a pension unless there's a comparable new change, but they're looking back at these court decisions and is it should or must, and I'm not going to get into the nitty-gritty details, but there is another case pending. It'll probably come out this year or next, and to the extent that it's even clear in what the California Supreme Court is going to say, certainly is uncertain about what they're going to do. And if there is some opportunity, some suggestion that maybe you can change these formulas on a go-forward basis, it's not an issue for this board. It's going to be an issue for boards of supervisors to decide whether they want to change the formulas on a go-forward basis. And we're kind of so many years almost away from PEPRA. In Mendocino County, don't you have more, hasn't it crossed like the 50% mark in terms of that most employees are already under PEPRA? Mm-hmm. And so the significance of that is the financial impact or savings is probably not even going to be that great by the time you get a decision, and by the time, and if and when a board of supervisors even decides to change that formula, and then there's probably going to be litigation on that. So it's not an issue for this board. It may never be an issue depending on what the California Supreme Court does with this Marin County case. But the issue, there's still a secondary issue that could come to this board. And at the time PEPRA was enacted, one of the issues that this board and other pension boards in California had to deal with was whether certain items are pensionable or not. And that's where PEPRA was a little bit unclear. And, you know, counsel like myself would go to conferences and we would talk about things like on-call and standby. And so we know on a go-forward basis that's not pensionable, but what about for current employees? Is that a vested right? And the attorneys and the retirement systems were pretty split on that. And for those of you who were on the board at that time may remember some of the discussions we've had. And since 2012, 2013, when we decided that on-call and standby, and perhaps there's other pay codes, are going to continue to be pensionable for current employees, we talked about the fact that a court someday in the future may disagree with that. And when the board adopted the resolution, we anticipated that, and I put a provision in that said, this is, our best understanding of the law. At some point, we could get a court decision that says something different. And if and when we do, so the Marin County decision could impact this idea of on-call and standby and change it and say, no, that was never meant to be something that current employees should be able to continue getting. And so for those who've retired with it, I don't think we'd go back and try to claw it back. I think it would be, the law doesn't favor retroactive application, so we might change it on a go-forward basis. But it's also possible that either the court won't reach that issue or would agree that it should be pensionable. So that's an issue that this board needs to keep an eye on, and depending on what that decision is, we might come back and have to revisit that. And I remember taking a look back at our minutes, and this whole discussion is memorialized in our minutes. And so I hope that was helpful, and happy to answer any questions.
If I could jump in there, for me in this case, there are a number of key takeaways, and there is some language in here that makes it very clear that while it's not an actual part of the decision, I think it's clear that the intent of the court here is if an employee has already accrued a benefit, that is untouchable. And I think that's important because there is the possibility for some fear mongering and some of our members to think, oh no, they're going to take away my pension because of this. Not even remotely close to true. What you've already got in the bank is there, and it can't be changed retroactively, in my opinion. If the California rule gets overturned or substantially changed, then the employer could have the opportunity to change future accruals only, and that's important. Part of the messaging that we're carrying out now is our job is not to set benefits. We merely administer the plan that's given to us by the legislature and the Board of Supervisors. So, and it was interesting when the decision came out, I was at the CalPERS General Assembly, and there was a lot of discussion about the decision, and they threw someone up on stage to talk about it because the room was abuzz. And there are two camps at the conference. There are the camps that, oh no, we have to defend the California rule and protect every benefit that our members get. And the other camp was, that's not our job. Our job is to run the plan that's given to us. I think you can all tell where I am. And I think that's what we've staked out as our territory here, policy-wise. It's not this board's job to protect and keep the benefits maximized for our members. It's to run the plan that we're given. We want to ensure that our members get every benefit that they're legally entitled to, but we don't determine what they get. We merely run the plan. So that's what I just wanted to add that.
Would the complications of running the plan be increased if they were able to change the plan for current employees going forward? Because you'd have part of their service at one plan and part of their service at another.
There would be some additional complexity, and we have dealt with that kind of complexity before. In the early 2000s, when benefits were enhanced, we had members that were already in the plan prior to that benefit increase. And and then the benefit increases happened, well, the members who were already in the plan had the opportunity to enhance their benefit to that higher level. So everyone got it on a go-forward basis, but anyone in the plan at that point could purchase the enhancement for prior service. So we have a number of members that crossed that threshold, some of who enhanced their benefit and some of who didn't. So we already have that kind of complication. It's not something brand new. It's not uncharted territory for us. It would involve, if it does happen, it would involve some programming in pension gold to make it happen, but it's not anything we could deal with.
And just to clarify a little bit, safety members were given it
Right.
proactive.
Yes, that's correct. General members had to buy the enhancement, but safety members got the retroactive enhancement at zero cost to themselves, to the member.
Those safety members, I'll tell you.
So is there any more discussion regarding,
That's why they carry a gun.
I want to thank you very much for clarifying, because I was a little, when I was reading it too, I was going, okay, we've got constitutional versus contractual, and contractuals, there's a give and take, right? And so in this case, that's not really what's going on. So it is very helpful, thank you.
Right.
Well, what I thought was interesting, how they separated the right to buy airtime away from other rights. Like you're going to get a 5% raise every year or something. You're going to get COLA. Well, we can't touch that. But on the other hand, we'll give you this right to, this option, you might say, to buy airtime. And then they separated those, as one is sort of constitutional and the other is contractual. And
Yeah.
when you read about it, it's like why they ever did it in the first place, because it was so obvious. I mean, you're a corporal and you know you're going to get promoted in 6 months and you got a bright future, you're going to be, well, you figure in 5 years you're going to be a lieutenant. And you're going, man, I'm going to buy that 5 years of extra time based upon being a corporal, except 5 years from now or when I retire, I'm going to be at a much higher level. And those studies showed that the county was paying 12 to 20% less than what the actual benefit turned out to be for the individual. Or I should say that the individual was paying 12 to 20% less. So seems like a good thing they did away with it.
That's kind of why we didn't adopt airtime or any of the, what are they?
Service purchases.
Where you retire 5 years or.
Oh, drop.
Drop, any of the drop programs. That this board never adopted any of these things. We weren't subject to airtime.
Oh, now, would that be for us to adopt, or would that be a benefit that the Board of Supervisors would have
I
given?
believe we did, I believe, but it's been a while.
That was a board. I thought it would be a board of supervisors. I'm not sure. I think it is.
Personal story, I served on a panel with Willie Brown at Stanford, and someone in the audience asked him about all of the pension enhancements that went in the early 2000s and why he could vote for them when they put everyone's pension in such jeopardy. And he said, well, I'm going to answer you as a politician, but I'm going to be honest. He said, I voted, the unions asked for those enhancements. I voted for them. I was a good guy. But I knew I wasn't going to be there to see how it all came down. They're purely political decision, and I would do the same thing again.
It's just a total sellout to the unions who bought the politicians. I mean,
So I'm not going to try to defend the unions or the decision, but had you not had the stock market collapse 5 years later, we wouldn't be talking about it. And so maybe you could say, well, every certain number of decades you're going to have it, but I mean, it was a catastrophic drop. You hadn't seen it since the 1930s, so, and the timing was just so close. If you wouldn't have had that in 2008, we wouldn't be talking about the California rule.
Richard?
Going back to, the legislature put it in place, but it was always an option of agencies. It was not a law created that everybody had to do. And some of this at CSAC argued against that bill for the simple reason that it created this race to the top on retirement. So the first agency that went 3% and 50
Yeah.
set it up so the next guy would have to do the same to fight for those same employees. But that was not, CSAC took a neutral position at that time on that legislation, which it shouldn't have.
No.
Okay. Any more discussion? Okay, moving forward to the administrative report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Trustees, you have the administrative report before you. I will just, I'm not going to talk about everything here. I do want to remind you, if you have not submitted your Form
Oh,
700
shoot.
to Judy, it is due by April 1st. For incoming and outgoing trustees, you are also required to submit a Form 700 within 30 days of your transition date. You have the legislative report. I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. I will say it's curious to me that at the beginning of the legislative session, while there are 11 pages of bills here, it seems much lighter than what we've seen in the past couple of years for pension legislation. I also included a report that was presented at the CalPERS General Assembly earlier this month that I thought was particularly poignant and interesting. For those of you that don't know CEM, they are a benchmarking organization for pension plans across the world. And they brought forth some lessons learned from, so they gather data from a number of pension systems across the world, and they analyze that data looking for trends and analysis, and it's benchmarking. And I did it when I was in Oklahoma, and you can compare how your investment performance looks versus other similar sized. And a lot of people do that, but what CEM also does is they look at your operational data. So they will tell you what your cost per client is, and they will break that down for you into IT and this and that. So they really get into the data from a large spectrum of plans. I did want to look at page 10 of their presentation where they have their takeaways for the investment space, which I thought were very intriguing. Takeaway number one is don't use fund to funds. The layering of fees erodes your likelihood of being able to outperform the market. Don't invest in hedge funds. You know I'm going to like that one. If you're a smaller plan, and they characterize 10 billion as a smaller plan, and in our world, that is a good break point between large plan and small plan. It just is. Their recommendation is that you don't use private markets, you use public markets instead. And they've got graphics in earlier slides explaining that. And then finally, indexing, especially in large cap, US large cap, is the way to go. So that's on the investment side.
Bless you.
Thank you.
Turning to the last page of their presentation, page 16, their takeaways for the administrative side. There is no free lunch when it comes to an IT investment. It is not going to lower your costs. When we made the decision to get a pension administration system, there may have been an expectation by some that we would be able to With automation, we would be able to reduce headcount here. What we've seen very clearly is we are using less staff time doing the work that a computer is well built to do. But now we're able to redirect that staff time to what the computer can't do. And that's using the 7 inches between our ears to solve highly complex problems. And we're taking on a lot of these projects. So it's not a reducing staff option, it's a redirecting staff time option is what you get with IT. Members are definitely benefiting from IT. The transactions taking place online are increasing rapidly. Members, as we're getting more of the younger members coming in, they like taking advantage of the technology. We're seeing the number of our members logging into Member Direct. It is a wide swath of our members that are using Member Direct on a monthly basis. We have some that are logging in 5, 7, 10 times in a month, but it's not the same people every month. But then we also have a large number of people that are logging in once a month. So we are seeing this taking place. And the last takeaway there, we've talked about it before, economies of scale are very real in this space. The larger plans are able to spread that administrative cost over a larger number of clients. And if you'll recall the downward sloping graph that we reviewed at the last offsite, and we're in the top left because we're a small plan in terms of numbers, and we've got our per member cost is much higher. It's just the reality of where we are. So wanted to share that with you. With that, I'd be happy to try to answer any questions you may have.
So just on the cost, though, there's a cap that the state sets for administrative expenses. We're well below that, right?
Correct. Yes. Our budget policy, the board's budget policy, institutes a lower cap than what is allowed by state law. In the 37 Act, we are allowed, the 37 Act plans have a budget cap for administrative expenses, not the investment expenses, just the administration, of the greater of $2 million or 21 basis points of your actuarial accrued liability. So for us, $2 million is the greater number. This board by policy has said that our budget cap will be 21 basis points of our actuarial accrued liability. In the current budget, that budget cap is $1.4 million, $1,427,000, I think. So we have adopted a much more conservative budget limit, and we are still operating below that cap. There may come a day where we have to have a discussion about, is that 21 basis points too restrictive? Do we need to move from that because of other things? That day is not today, but that's where we are.
Okay,
I have a question on the recruitment for the financial officer. I see there were 2 candidates that applied and then didn't want to be interviewed, is that what it was?
That's correct.
Is it something we should look at changing in our job description, or did they give you any reason why they decided not to?
Location.
They didn't want to come here?
what
Or
about,
couldn't find a place to live.
So the 2 that declined were both from out of the area. One was from Marin, the other was from South Carolina.
wow,
Didn't they know they were going to have to live here if they applied for the job?
Yeah.
Did
Why did
they
they
know
apply?
that in advance?
did they mention telecommuting?
Yeah, I was just thinking.
They did not.
He came all the way from Nebraska to live here.
Going back a little bit on the retirement report or monthly report,
Mhm.
on the activity report, I find that kind of I have to really think about it when I look at it, like, what does it really mean? And I wonder if we could do that on a spreadsheet with, there's 5 data points. Could we have 5 lines on there, on one spreadsheet, or a couple?
You mean a graph?
A graph.
Create a graph for the
Yeah,
numbers?
so instead of putting it out this way,
Oh, I
just
see.
update the graph every month and.
So it goes up and down.
Yeah, so we just look at the graph every month and we see the,
You can have both on the same spreadsheet.
well,
Right.
yeah, you have both.
I mean, you can have
Yeah,
the
it
little
wouldn't-
at the bottom, you can
Yeah,
have the
but it'd be
number.
easy to make a input the spreadsheet at the same time or
That's a good
in
idea.
lieu of,
Absolutely.
Yes.
We'll look at that.
without going backwards, you know.
No, we have the data.
Oh, well, you know, don't want to make it into a big job, but going forward, I don't think it'd be too hard.
17 minutes.
Thank you.
And James would have fun doing it.
Katie will have that for you in 17 minutes.
Okay, then I guess we'll move on to general board member discussion. Does anybody have anything that they would like to discuss? I just, I don't know if everybody is aware of it, but the State Association of County Retirement Systems, we had Selena Peterson's our administrator. And she has separated from Shy Yoder, and she's now on her own. And Sacris is contracting directly with her, whereas before Sacris was contracting with Shy Yoder. So we're also, our meeting place, our office space is going to a different area. It's in Sacramento, but it's no longer that huge building on L Street, 1415 L Street. It was just this like 12-story building, and it's more personal. And we're happy, we feel that this way we won't have to go through as many channels. We can work directly with Sulema, and we're happy about it. So we'll see, we have an annual review, so we'll see how it goes, but we think that it's probably gonna be a good move, so. And then, the spring conference is coming up in May, and in July, we're having the Berkeley investment 4-day workshop, so to speak. And it's always, there's always a consideration that if you go there once, that's all you need to do. But every year it's new and different information. So, and there's also, input. If you go there and you'd like to see something else, there's a lot of people are happy to hear what you would rather see or whatever, because when I visited Alameda County Retirement System, and they were saying that they would like it to be more academic and less on personal opinions about defined benefits, defined contributions and that, so it's very, it's not set in stone. There's a lot of flexibility. So.
And Callan College is June 5th, I believe.
Okay, yeah.
That's really great.
You think that's maybe,
They're both great.
they're good, yeah. So, and that's all I have to say. I don't know if anybody else.
It's gonna be our shortest meeting
Ever.
ever.
So, does anyone make a motion to adjourn the meeting?
You can just adjourn it.
I can just adjourn it? Okay, meeting adjourned.
Welcome to your first meeting, boys.
Yeah. Yeah,
Don't
make 'em like
count
that
on
one.
this.
Yeah.
Yeah.